give them a round of applause for joining us tonight. Starting, going, I guess, right to left, my right, their left, we have Tonya Millis, the Libertarian candidate for Congress. We will be giving each candidate 2 minutes to give an opening. And Tonya, if you want to start, I'll let you begin.
Thank you. I'm Tonya Millis, the Libertarian running for U.S. House, District 9. I ran 2 years ago against Trey Hollingsworth. It was a very contentious presidential race, and being that Indiana is predominantly a red state, so many of the people just went into the booth and pressed that lever for Trump and walked out, and that was an automatic vote for my opponent. In 2020, District 9 had 14 counties, and almost all the counties, the percentage that my opponent got matched Trump's. There was a couple counties that had a little variation, but it was very close. I'm a real estate broker. I work with people from the low income scale to middle to high income, all walks of life, and I enjoy doing that. I'm running again. It's an open seat now, and we'll see how it goes. I look forward to talking with you after we do the town hall. If you have any questions, please feel free to, approach me, and we'll have a conversation. So, thank you for coming.
And our next candidate, of course, is Matt Fife. He is also a candidate for Congress on the Democratic ticket. Matt?
Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Fife, and I just want to start by thanking you all for being here. I think having these public discussions and seeing about the issues and talking about the issues, whether we completely agree or even disagree a little bit, is so important. And without them, we wouldn't have such a great democracy that we have today, and I hope this continues and only grows from here. So my name is Matt Fife. I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives here in the 9th District. That now covers all of Scott County, is now in the 9th District, so if you're here in Scott County, yay. I'm a teacher normally by trade. I come from a union household. I'm a leader in my own union nowadays, and I have 3 children, ages 8, 5, and 1. And I'm running because, man, it just seems like politicians in D.C. don't understand what it's like here on the ground in Indiana anymore. They don't quite see what it's like to get up and go to work and actually work hard for your Hoosier families. And I want to change that. And again, I'm going to thank you for being here today. If you'd like to speak with me, I'm also available. I'll be around afterwards. And thank you.
All right. And then, of course, we've also got running for US Senate, James Sceniak, Libertarian candidate. James?
Hi, thank you all for being here so much. This town hall is exactly what we need to have true discussions. And I can't think of a better place to be on a Tuesday night than Scottsburg. I truly mean that because it's you who I want to represent. I'm a behavior therapist, so I work with kids with autism, and I am passionate about serving people, and that's what I want to take to Washington, D.C. I believe that Washington has left Hoosiers behind, and we need to make a difference. I'm running on 3 primary things. 1, my Beg Care program. My Beg Care program takes away the waste from the VA, and it removes that waste and allows you, a veteran, to get the medical care that they need. So it takes out wasteful funding, and it uses something similar to a health savings account, which is what I call a veteran's personal care account. And this will allow you to go to whatever physician you want and whatever place to meet your medical needs. The second thing I'm running on is fiscal sanity. At this point, Washington has left Hoosiers behind, and it's hurting our wallets. We see it every day with inflation rates out crazy. 8% is the conservative rate with inflation, so we need someone to have fiscal sanity in Washington. The third thing that I'm running on is medical freedom. I don't believe that politicians should act as our physicians. They can't make medical decisions for you. And this is something I'm passionate about. I believe that government has overstepped, and we need a true change in Washington, D.C. So I appreciate you coming out tonight. I appreciate the discussion we're going to have, and I look forward to talking with you afterwards as well. So stick around, and again, appreciate all of you. Thank you.
And then, let's see here. Jeff, refresh my memory.
Jeff Moore,
More, but you're running for
Secretary of State.
Yes, thank you. I didn't want to say the wrong office. So we have Jeff. He's a Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. As you've heard here already, it really is the privilege of being in a civilized society to come here and have a conversation, a discourse, and use our words and not our fists. So on behalf of all Libertarians who are peaceful, very grateful to be here and to have this opportunity together. So as you heard, my name is Jeff Maurer, M-A-U-R-E-R, because that's the obvious spelling. And I am the Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State. That's an office that we might not hear a whole lot about until something goes very, very wrong with our elections. And when we look back at 2020, 2016, and for those of us who are old enough to remember 2020 when we had, 2000, we had pregnant chads and dimpled chads and hanging chads. It's quite clear that our election technology and our election processes just aren't keeping up with our modern society. We have to have trust and faith in our elections. We have to believe the results are accurate. Elections are how we come together to agree to disagree. And if we don't have that agreement, even when we disagree on candidates and policies and even parties, that's when we get into dangerous territory like January 6th. So I'm running to bring nonpartisan solutions so that way we can all trust the results of our elections. I want to give you a printed receipt so that when you walk out of the voting booth, you can have confirmation, just like a lottery ticket, right? It shows you printed lottery numbers. You don't have to guess or remember what lottery numbers those were. You have a printed receipt that shows exactly how you voted, and you can go onto the Secretary of State's website and look that up and confirm that your vote was counted. For those of us who remember back to the 80s and 90s when we were helping the Soviet Union denuclearize, we had a policy of trust but verify. It worked. It does work now. It'll continue to work. So I want to trust but verify our votes and use receipts, not rocket science, to make sure that you have that trust in our elections. I look forward to your questions later and the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Good. And then our last candidate this evening, certainly not least, running for State Representative, District 69, Mr. Chad Harmon.
How you doing? A lot of people ask why I'm running, and it basically started one day when I was looking at my Facebook, and I had seen that a friend had overdosed, and also there was another person that was talking about somebody committed suicide. And then I look on my politicians' pages, and they're posting stupid memes about, masks, and and I was just like, they are really leaving us behind. They do not care about people dying out here. And I just want to represent the people of rural Indiana. I grew up in a poverty-stricken town over in Brazil, Indiana, one of the poorest towns in Indiana. So I've seen, the effects that it has. And the politicians have been running the state for 12 years at least. They could do more, and they are actively choosing not to do more. And I want to do more to help people like you. Thank you for having me.
Now, before we start our question and answers, I'll give a few rules of the road. But before that, I do want to recognize some of our other candidates who will not be participating in the forum tonight, but are present with us. And so, if you are a candidate running locally, if you would please stand, say your name, what office you're running for, and we'll move around the room. John Lisenby, why don't we start with you?
I'm John Lisby. I'm the current county commissioner, and I'm running for re-election. And I based a whole lot of my campaign on emergency services. Thing he's done. I've backed our ambulance services. I've backed our health department. I've backed our fire departments. I came from that field, and that's the field I'm going to continue backing. So thank you.
I'm Jerry Gooden. I'm the current sheriff here in Scott County. Again, I'll be running for re-election. I appreciate John's help. We've got to get back to basics. Okay. We've got also be working with our judge. Something else I did as a sheriff was kind of a novel idea, was to work with the judge and the prosecutor. So we've been doing that, been successful at it, and we just want to keep our team together. Thank you.
I'm Mike Zolan. I'm a candidate for County Council District Number 3. I served 3 terms as County Councilman at large, and I also got trumped in the last election. And I'm going to run for District 3 now, trying to get back on the council. I was president of council 5 out of 12 years. I've got a lot of experience. I support John Lisby and Jerry Gooden wholeheartedly. Jerry Gooden's the best sheriff Scott County's ever had, and maybe one of the best ones in the state. It's amazing what he's done with our facility over there. I also was president of council, like John mentioned, when we got health department, when we built a new jail, and when we remodeled EMS. So I'm a progressive. I don't say that I'm a liberal, but I'm a progressive. I believe in progress, and I just appreciate y'all being here.
I'm Jason Mount. I'm the judge of the Scott Circuit Court and running for re-election. I've been the judge of the Scott Circuit Court since 2017. I was a prosecuting attorney before that. I won't take up a lot of time here. If anybody has any questions for me, I'll hang around a minute or two afterwards. I will say that one of the things that in the last 6 years that I'm proudest of is our ability to keep open courts through the pandemic, which is something, an obstacle that I feel like we addressed very efficiently and we're able to get through. And we've got some, some of you may know, some more obstacles the circuit court is facing right now with our facilities, which are shut down due to some problems with our roof. So we've been through that recently, getting ourselves relocated. So I appreciate everybody's support. And I will just briefly say Judge Hauser, who's also on the ballot for Scott Superior Court, could not be here tonight, so she does send her regards. Thank you.
I'm Chris Owens. I'm the prosecuting attorney here in Scott County. I'm also up for re-election. I took over as prosecutor in 2017. I spent 8 years as the chief deputy prosecutor before that. My goal as a prosecutor is to make Scott County the safest place that it can be, so that people feel safe to live here, people feel safe when they visit here. And number one priority is to make this a safe place so that our kids, when they get out of high school, whether they go take a job somewhere, hopefully it's locally, whether they go to college, they want to come back to Scott County. And I want businesses to see that this is one of the safest places to be in Indiana, so they want to relocate here. They want to bring new businesses here so we have jobs for our community. And I think we do that by holding people who commit crimes accountable. And if you can't follow the rules of our society, then you can go to jail for that. And that's where you belong if you can't follow the rules.
I'm Jessica Fetter. I'm running for County Council District 2, which is Lexington. I'm running one because I want to see younger people within the party. No offense, and I'm not that young, but I'm younger. We need some younger, more vibrant people to lead it in the future. Number 2, I have an 8-year-old son who I really want to see him thrive in this community and stay here. I've moved away from Scott County and I chose to move back. My husband is not from Scott County. He's actually from Chicago, and he chooses to live here because he wants to live here. I'm also very involved. I'm an executive director of a nonprofit which is in the rail safety industry. I work for our nation's railroads and the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Road Administration, and NDOT. We all work together very carefully and concisely. And so I've been involved in that for about 13 years. Senate Transportation Chair Michael Kreider is on my board. I know him well, and Holly Sullivan used to be on my board, so I'm very good at navigating both sides of the aisle in what I do, which I think is good. You need to be able to do those things and not just be polarized. Also, I just want to see Scott County thrive and do better. We've had a lot of contention, a lot of problems over the last few years, and I want to see that change. And I want to see it be a better place for all of us in the future. So I think that's the main reason why I'm running. It's been in my blood my whole life. My grandparents were in office. This one's related to me, even though he doesn't claim me sometimes. But other than that, I think it's just, I don't think Scott County is a bad place, and we've had a lot of bad press and a lot of negativity, and I don't believe that because it's not true. And so I just want to see us do better and make sure that we're fiscally responsible and that we're doing what we should for our community.
Seeing no one else jump up, I will then move into the question phase for the panel here tonight. We have asked that you complete a questionnaire form so that we can ask and be organized with our questions tonight. Each individual we'll rotate through the questions. We will provide 2 minutes each for their answers on the questions. And then at the end, we'll do some closing comments as well. For the start, we're going to start with Matt Fife, since we started the introductions with Tonya, and then we'll rotate through accordingly on each question. So this first question comes from Guy Townsend. And Guy, I think you're hitting on a theme tonight. We've heard a lot of people talking about how we want to see our community do better. We want to see people be participants in our democracy. And you've got a rather straightforward question. How can we improve participation at the local level? Very good question. Matt, why don't you lead us off?
Great question. So I'm a teacher normally, and I think one thing I want to see from all my students is that they get out there and they succeed. And part of that success is that they're involved, right? That they are talking to each other, that they're starting organizations, that they're advocating for the things that they care about. And again, I'm a teacher by trade, but what's gotten me into this is that when I go into the classrooms, I see that when I'm trying to advocate for their success, sometimes the policies we have in place don't allow that. And I only have 2 minutes, so I won't jump into the education part of that, but I'll jump into what we can do to get people involved right now. And the first thing is to get people running, like many of you who stood up, who really care about the community. And so thank you for running. The second thing we can do is what we're doing right now, to continue to have town halls, to continue to get people excited and involved and questions being asked and answered. And the third thing, which I think we can do from a policy perspective, is to get some of the money out of the elections, right? Like, so when I'm running for office, and when some of my competitors are running for office, it just seems like our DC politicians are bought out half the time, right? That they're in it for their own self-interest, that they're in it for big money interests, and I think if we just write a policy, a simple one that says, that's not okay, we're gonna have a lot better people running for office, and we're gonna have people who actually care to get something done when they get there. And I think when that happens, when we can see that our politicians care, it makes more people feel involved, right? If I know that when I go out that everybody on the ballot is gonna try to do something, then I'm gonna be there to listen to them, and I'm gonna care more from a voter perspective. And so I think the number one reason I'm running for office is because we need people who care. We need actual public servants, not people who are in it for their own self-interest, party, big money, or whatever.
And that's your time.
And that's what I would say from a policy perspective we need to do. Great question, guys.
All right. And we'll move on to James. James, again, how can we improve participation at the local level?
Guy, great question. Thanks for it. There's a lot of things we can do. And one is exactly what we're doing right now, town halls. But we have to get those who are not currently interested in politics interested. How do we do that? We bring issues that matter to them. So criminal justice reform. Many young individuals see no change in Washington, D.C. And they want these issues brought forward. They want to see their politicians care about their communities. And they want to see politicians that are not bought out. We have to present actual solutions that appeal to a younger crowd. Right now we have 60% of registered voters not even voting, and then on top of that, those who are registered are often in a demographic that is in the age 60 and above bracket. So we have to work on appealing to a message to a younger generation, because that is the future of America, and that is what we need to be passionate about. When we show solutions that care about their children and their children's children, and the opportunities and innovation that can happen in future generations, we will appeal to a younger generation. We also need to bring issues like cannabis to the table. We need to bring education and how important that is. So let's change the conversation. Instead of having those screaming on the left, a very far message over here, and a very far message to the right over here. Most of America is at the table and wants actual solutions. So that's what we need to focus on. We need to focus the message to a younger generation as well. And I really appreciate that question, guys. Thank you.
Jeff, that takes us to you.
Sure. So these are all echoes of the same issue. How do we create a community where we want our children to come back, or our children want to come back and live here? How do we have the safety and the hope of a better tomorrow? And I'll take an election spin on this, right? Secretary of State is about elections. And elections is the process through which we choose our future. This is how we choose how we want to live, and it's the future that we choose for ourselves. And Indiana ranks 46 out of 50 states for voter turnout. It's pretty pathetic, abysmal. So how do we get people more engaged and more involved? And the election part is part of that. So one way to do that is to have more compelling candidates. One way to have that is more direct access. Another way to have that is to have more conversation. I'm not sure there's anybody in this room who's not running for office, and that's great. Okay, we got one hand. But what if we had this conversation out in the skateboard park or at high school recess when school is in session? So we have to do our part as well in order to go to where young people are, not to force them to listen, but to show them, to model the behaviors that we want to see them emulate. So that's part of it. But part of it's just that transparency, that good governance, to say this is the right way to do things, and we're going to have elections in a transparent and accountable way. And we're all going to be able to see the results, even if we disagree with who gets elected and their policies and their party. That's okay, because we agree on the process. Again, we agree to disagree, and that maturity, that professionalism, that Americanism, that's who we are as peaceful people. That's what will transcend and really bring in a new young generation to get active, get engaged, and to believe and practice that their future is in their hands. Thank you.
Chad, it's to you now. Again, how do we improve participation at the local level?
Okay, so I went, including my bachelor's, my master's, I went to school in Indiana for 18 years, and not one of those times did in any class, anywhere, did they tell me what a state representative was, or what a county council person does, or what a commission. We just need to educate people about how these things actually affect their life. Like, people in the State House can make decisions that can help them. And I think that we need to get some education out there, expand voting. I mean, we can, the 6 to 6 hour, I mean, expand it a little bit longer, get more turnout, get people more excited. We have to have some wins. We have to, start to build up the momentum from actually achieving something through the common ground. I think that, people don't like the word common sense because it insinuates that if you don't agree with me, you don't have sense, and I'm not saying that, but there is common ground between all parties, and we just need to meet there, and everybody will, get excited for politics. Great question. Thank you.
And then Tonya, you're going to round out this first question. Again, how can we improve participation at the local level?
Okay. I actually would have loved to have seen a lot more younger people here. No offense to y'all, but before I got into real estate, I worked at Brown County High School in the nurse's office. And Mitch Daniels was running for governor, and he was doing his bus tour, and you guys may have seen it. He came to the high school and talked to the seniors. Well, now those seniors are in their late 30s, 40-ish now, because this was a while back. But changing hearts, young hearts and minds at that level encouraged those young people to get involved, because he was talking to them at their level and issues that they were going to be facing once they got out into the real world. So I would like to see more candidates, myself included, go to the schools and campuses, college campuses, and talk to the young people about what is on their minds and encourage them to get involved. Not just vote, but be leaders in their community, whether they do volunteer work or run for office themselves. So I think we here need to set the example for the young people and get them more involved. So that's my plan on that. Thank you.
This next question kind of follows, I think, along with some current events that have been on a lot of our minds. It's from Mike Zolman. What can be done about government contracts to gun manufacturers who also sell military weapons to the general public? So I think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, you're really getting at the gun-related issue. How do how do we address the gun violence in our...
There's been proposals, age limits, so on and so forth. It appears to me that we need to take military-style weapons off the street.
All right. So again, what can be done about government contracts to gun manufacturers who also sell military weapons to the general public? And James, you're leading this one off, I think.
My great question. As a candidate, I am pro 2A, but I also feel there's a responsibility as far as how we approach this issue. And violence is definitely an issue in all of America. When we look at violence and what causes violence from a mental health perspective, we understand that opportunity and innovation actually decreases violence. So if you look at the last 30 years, as America, we are on a decrease of violent crime. The only 2 years that that's not true was during COVID, which it did increase. And that shows me that when people don't have opportunities and innovation, they often look for sources of other ways to get by, and a lot of times that's violence. So the first is we have to give opportunities. When we talk about guns and government contracts, government should stay out of the manufacturing of guns. That is something that the gun manufacturers and the contractors from the government, we don't need to be supporting those manufacturers from the government stance. They can independently do that, and everybody can get their own contracts wherever that it goes. So there are solutions to violent crimes, and there are also ways that we can reduce the government involvement within supporting the guns as well.
Jeff, it's to you.
So again, the Secretary of State's office, remember this is a very administrative office. It should not have a policy component, right? This should be serving all Hoosiers equally. So let me talk a little bit about ways that we can have truly nonpartisan technologies and processes that serve all of us, regardless of where we stand personally on gun violence and gun issues and Second Amendment rights. One of the roles of the Secretary of State is to leverage the bully pulpit and to ask the General Assembly to create our law that serves us. And one of the things that I pledge to do as Secretary of State is to ask for greater powers of referenda and ballot initiative. Those two things give so much power directly to us, we the people. It takes away the middleman of government, of state government, of the governor, and it gives us the tools directly to go out and get signatures and to write the own laws that we want for ourselves. This is truly the core of self-government, which is who we are as Americans. And with that tool, we don't have to worry about what happens in DC. We don't have to worry about what's happening in the State House. We can get together enough of our neighbors, and again, on a level, like in rooms like this, on streets like where we live, we can go out. We know who those people are. We know who those voices are. We can get the signatures we need. And that process, or through that process, ballot initiative and referenda, we can get the legislation written that we want for ourselves. So it's a very powerful tool that doesn't matter where we stand politically or on policy. That's important for me, it's important for you. It's truly fundamental to the concept of self-rule. And as Secretary of State, that's what I want for all of us, to be able to have that power over our government and the power of self-rule. Thank you.
And again, Chad?
Oh, yeah.
What can be done about government contracts to gun manufacturers who also sell military weapons to the general public?
Well, let me tell you, I agreed with myself that I would run, and as long as I didn't have to pretend to be something or know something I don't know. So I don't know a lot about the actual contracts with the government, so I'm not going to make something up there. As far as safety goes, I truly believe in the common ground here. I think that everybody wants background checks. I think, red flag laws, if somebody's dangerous enough to take their gun away, for the next 14 days, they shouldn't be also allowed to buy another gun. So I think that, we can call it as of June 14th, 2022, we have enough assault rifles in the country. We made it. Let's just stop making them. Stop selling them and stop making them. If you have one, you can keep it. I'm not coming to, I don't want the government to come get it, but I think that we've got enough. And I think that it's dangerous out there, and we need to do what we can to make it safe for, I've got 3 kids, all in elementary, middle school, and high school. And every time there's a school shooting, the first thing I do is immediately check to make sure that it's not any of those 3 schools. And then I'm relieved. But there's people out there that when they see that and they check that, it's their kids. Their kids were at that school and shot by these weapons and decapitated, and it's, you know, they're too dangerous. You know, I've been working on a metaphor for this, and I can't, you know, people who drive race cars like Will Power, you know, they can drive those safely on the interstate, open wheel roads, but we can't because we don't know what we're doing. So, you know, just say that that's an AR-15. People don't know what they're doing with them, and we made it. We got enough. That's all I got. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I'm a Libertarian and Constitutionalist, and I support the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment. I don't think our rights should be infringed at all. The Second Amendment was to protect the First Amendment. I'm not familiar with government contracts where they buy weapons for our military, that those same weapons are also being sold to the public. I'm not aware of that. I know our military doesn't use the AR-15s. That's strictly to the public. So I think the problem with these young guys that are doing the mass shootings, they're troubled, broken homes, they have no soul, and I really would like to see that issue addressed. We need to help these people, whether it's mental health at the local level, and that's where we need to focus on. So, and I would echo what James was talking about when he addressed that. So that's where I'm at on that.
Matt, you'll round this out.
I grew up here in Indiana. My family grew up with guns. I think they were responsible gun owners. My neighbors hunt. I got a lot of neighbors that hunt today. There are a lot of responsible gun owners. It seems like we can keep guns out of irresponsible hands, though, right? We can be pro-Second Amendment, but also want to keep guns out of irresponsible hands. And I think that's where your question is going, is how do we allow an 18-year-old to go buy a gun and be able to outshoot trained police officers? That's not safe. Especially, and you know, the candidates have said this up here, other people have said this, when there seems to be something troubled about that 18-year-old who goes to buy the gun. I'm a gun sense candidate. That means I've been awarded a gun sense candidate, which simply means I'm concerned about the violence that's happening in our community that happens with guns. As a teacher, not only am I concerned with every time I have to do an active shooter drill and teach the children in my room how to hide or stand up for themselves, not only am I worried about having to stand up to somebody who comes through my door as a teacher, but I'm also worried about the over 50 suicides that happen a day with guns here in America. I'm pro-Second Amendment, but we need to keep the guns in responsible hands, not irresponsible ones. And we need candidates who are willing to come together and do something about it, because action needs to happen. Specifically with contractors, I also don't know much about the contracts, but to me it seems like we need to keep military weapons out of hands of the general public. And we have done this before. 90 years ago, within the Constitution, we said, automatic weapons. Everybody here in this room can go get an automatic weapon today, but you have to go through background checks first, right? It takes about a year of background checks. And it makes sense that we could say the same thing for military-style weapons that are being used today, that yes, you can still go get them, but there should be more extensive background checks, right? There should be something that keeps an 18-year-old from being able to outshoot the trained police officers. So that's where I stand on this issue.
And I think we got everyone there, so we're ready for our third question. This one does not have a name attached, so we'll just call this Mr. Anonymous. But I think that the question is a pretty valid one, also on the sphere of current events. In a time where the public has all-time low views of law enforcement, what plan do you have to instill confidence back into law enforcement? So again, in a time where the public has an all-time low views of law enforcement. What plan do you have to instill confidence back into law enforcement? And Jeff, I believe you're up first on this one.
Well, Sheriff, I'm going to keep an eye on you as I'm answering this one. So give me a face as you go. Again, let me take this from the perspective of a very nonpartisan Secretary of State. It's not for me to understand or evaluate what law enforcement is doing well or doing poorly for any elected official for that matter. But a broader term, one of the tools that, again, I will use my bullet pulpit with the General Assembly to advance is the power of recall. We don't have this power in Indiana. Some states like California have it. Famously, they recall their governor or mayors from time to time. But recall is a way for the citizens to get together, again, getting enough signatures together and saying, whoever's in office, whether it be a sheriff, a state representative, a congressman, a governor, doesn't matter. If we the people, are dissatisfied with government's performance for us, we should have the power to recall them. We shouldn't have to wait 1, 2, 5, 6 years until they're up for re-election again, because likely we're going to forget. They count on us to forget. There's some other scandal, there's some other news, there's some other emergency that prevents us from focusing or remembering what got us so frustrated and disappointed in the first place. So recall is a powerful tool, again, one that is nonpartisan and really about good governance for all of us, no matter how you feel. But let's say there's a sheriff or there is an elected official who has lied or broken campaign promises or just isn't doing a good job. Recall brings that person out of office and threatens to do so, or threatens to do so. We also heard earlier about the disgusting amount of money in politics. Let me have a show of hands here. Who in the room wants more money in politics? Okay, so no hands went up. Good, we all agree. See, something we all agree on, that's great. So how do we get money out of politics then is the question. And recall is one of those tools. It's sort of like, it cuts the return on investment. So if you've got a car and you know that it may not go another 10 miles, you're probably not going to put $10,000 worth of maintenance or repair into it. But if you've got a car and you know it's going to last 100,000 miles, it might be worth that repair. And so the money that flows into politics is about influencing and shaping elected officials, whether it be sheriffs or anyone else. And if we can undermine the security of their tenure in office by recall, if we just don't like them at any point or they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, we can pull them back at any point. That undermines their value, and that undermines how much people might be willing to pay into their campaigns. And now suddenly, we're taking money out of politics. That's a win for us, that's a win for democracy, that's a win for us as Americans. Power of recall.
2 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, 10?
2.
2, okay.
Not 10,
All
2.
right.
Thank you, good job. Chad, you're up next. Again, in a time where the public has an all-time low view of law enforcement, what plan do you have to instill confidence back into law enforcement?
So I think the main problem is that we're asking law enforcement officers to do jobs that it's not their responsibility or it's not what they signed up to do. I don't think that there's a lot of mental health crises that they get involved with that they don't need to be involved in that. That's not their specialty. I think we need, increased training, but, the problem with that is that there's always going to be, the bad apples that kind of give everybody a bad, all these bad names. So, we kind of have to look past that and train them more and get some mental health officers. Or get people that are, that's their expertise and get them employed by the law enforcement office and, get them to help out that way with, the more milder but sensitive situations. I think we just need to keep cops in safe situations as well. So that's what I think.
Tonya, you're up next. You need the
No.
question.
I'm
You're good.
I'm
Okay.
good, thank you. I'm running for US House of Representatives, and I don't think that the government in Washington, D.C. should be dictating to the states how they have their state and local police departments. The county sheriffs are elected by the local people, and how they are viewed by the people is how they perform. Some departments do very well, and some are corrupt. And so it's up to we the people who elect our officials to get involved and make sure that our sheriff's departments and the police force are doing what they are doing. So that's where I'm at on that.
Matt.
Can you say it one more time for me?
In a time where the public has all-time low views of law enforcement, what plan do you have to instill confidence back into law enforcement?
So anonymous person. This is an interestingly worded question. I appreciate it. So the first thing that went through my mind was how we have low confidence in our elected officials, and low confidence in seems like schools, our teachers, low confidence in police officers. A lot of these public servants aren't trusted as much anymore. The second kind of thought I had is how do we instill confidence in that again? And I think our leaders need to be the first one to say, right, we trust our police officers. We want to see them doing good in our community as well. Just like we want to see our teachers do well, we want to see our police officers, our nurses, these public servants who are there for us, we want to see them do a great job. And we need to look for the ones like Jerry Gooden sitting here today, sheriff whose jail has been doing fantastic, right? We need to look to them and show what it can look like and how it helps a community. And then the third thing I had in mind was it just kind of comes back to that first question that we had today. There are so many divisions, it seems like. How do we actually get together and do work? And we need to, again, get to the point where our people running for office, the public is trusting the people running for office. The public is getting involved. And we're working together, no matter which side of the aisle on, you're working together for your community. And working together means trusting teachers, nurses, and police officers, people who are working hard for the community, and investing in them. So, again, I think it's an interesting question. Thank you for it.
And James, again, you're finishing it off. In a time where the public has an all-time low view of law enforcement, what plan do you have to instill confidence back into law enforcement?
So this is a really great question. It's something that's very relevant today. First, a little bit of background for me. I was previously a corrections officer, so I have a little bit of law enforcement behind me. And then additionally to that, I've had personal situations where I saw my brother, who was a minority, a black minority, jailed for something that I, as a white person, would not be. So there's a personal element to this, and there's a very professional element to this as well. But first and foremost, when I think of a police officer, I think of serve and protect. We really have to bring the service part of our police officers. And I actually agree with something that was stated earlier. I would love to see mental health workers on the field with police officers. Something I work with is autism currently, and officers are currently not trained on how to deal with someone with autism. When you tell someone with autism to raise their hands, they're not aware how to raise their hands. So we definitely have to work on working with mental professionals in this field. But the solutions aren't as divided as we think. We hear terms such as defund the police on one side, and we hear terms such as back the blue on the other. We're really not as divided as the media likes to make us sound. We want a civil society where we can trust police officers, where we truly feel that they are public servants. How many times have you got pulled over where you were nervous that you were going to get a speeding ticket, but then that speeding ticket turned into, now I want to search your car, and maybe I suspect I smell cannabis when I've never had cannabis in the car. Those are real situations that people are dealing with. So when we talk about wanting to restore trust in our police officers, we have to start with the police officers themselves, because that's the government's role. That's what we have to look at. When we talk about the bad apples, we have to call out the bad apples. If we want the public to see our police officers as public servants, we have to be able to prosecute police officers the exact same way we prosecute any citizen. Laws are for everybody. Laws don't discriminate against, or shouldn't discriminate. So if a police officer does it wrong, they should be prosecuted just like any other citizen. I don't know how many of you have heard of Breonna's Law, but that's something I would love to see on the federal level. No knock warrants. And this is something that got pushed back from the police officers. But when we truly look at this issue, it actually is safer for police officers. It's less of a risk, and it's something that we can do to both protect citizens and protect police officers. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have
Jim Craig, a lifetime resident of Scott County. We talk about their law enforcement, we talk about violence, we talk about guns. And if I understand this correctly, effective 1st of July, an individual can carry a gun openly in the state of Indiana. Anyone. And it seems to me if the permit was working, why would we do that? And I'd like to ask these 5 people here if they support. Here's our sheriff. I'm sure there's times when our law enforcement approach people. Now they don't know whether they got a gun or they don't have a gun. If they had a permit, it would eliminate some of them. But I'd like to know if these 5 people support something like this.
So your question, to paraphrase, is do you support the permitless carry law?
Yes.
Open carry law, okay. And let's see, we started, Chad, why don't you start us off with that?
Okay. No.
I can just say yes or no.
No, I don't. I have an 18-year-old son, and the thought of him with just being able to go get an AR-15 just because he wants to is a little scary. You know, I think that the systems that we had were, you know, when I got in this race, I did not want to talk about guns. That was not, you know, there are a lot of gun owners in my district, heavily armed district. So, you know, it's not really something that I was looking forward to, but, you know, the shooting in, you know, Uvalde and Buffalo, and, you know, I just think that for the safety of law enforcement officers, that you should have to have a permit. They should not have to approach a car and not know if there's a gun in there. So, no.
All right, Tonya?
You're talking about an Indiana state law for this particular state is different from state to state, but the way the law is written, that goes into effect July 1st, I'm okay with that.
Matt?
No. And I think part of it comes down to the fact that, again, we don't know if there's an 18-year-old who is a little bit unhinged. I mean, we keep coming back to, I guess, that specific topic, but, you know, we don't know who is carrying that and who's buying the gun in the first place, if they are responsible or irresponsible. And secondly, I say no because I've listened to police officers who say that it is more frightening going up to people now. I've listened to the police officers who were at the state level and said that they don't want that bill to be passed. And I will at least point out, we have a supermajority of Republicans in the State House that did not listen to the police officers. So it seems hypocritical of me to say that we back the blue and then not listen to them. Secondly, by taking the money away from that permit, so there used to be a tax on it, you're also taking away money from our police officers. So that's a little bit different than your question asked. I at least want to point that out because I am different from other candidates for the race I'm running for in that case. So thanks for asking.
I did want to tell them too, I do have guns and I've always had a permit.
Very good. James?
So great question. I want to look at it a little bit different approach. Your First Amendment right, do you need a permit to use free speech? And if you do need that permit, should that permit be taxed? And is it free speech then? I would argue that most of us would say that's not free speech. When we talk about our amendment rights and our constitutional rights, we have to put it in perspective of what they are. They are our rights until we lose them. There are situations where we do lose those rights. And so, as your question is stated, I believe we have that Second Amendment right until we lose it, which there are ways to lose it if we commit a violent crime. That's a perfect example of losing that right. But as far as what Indiana did, I don't see anything wrong with it, and I honestly don't believe our rights should be taxed. Thank you.
Jeff, it's up to you.
All right. Well, that's a lot of pressure. But let me start with a question. Sheriff, is there a website that I can go to now and see in real time where every officer is on duty, his or her cruiser, firepower, and so the answer is no. And why is that? Cost, okay. Would it endanger those officers if I know that they're on the other side of town, or the public at large, right? If I know they're on the other side of town, but I want to rob the mini mart on this side of town, is that public information potentially dangerous to the officer and to the public? It is. So we can all agree that the real deterrence is in not knowing, right? Is not knowing the capability behind. If I know that your officer is only carrying a certain weapon or only can drive so fast or is in one part of town and not the other, that suddenly doesn't offer deterrence so that I might speed in the other part of town. And having the right, the sacred right to defend oneself, maybe not openly, but to be able to preserve that deterrence, to say, you don't know what I have. You don't know what I'm capable of. And therefore, that uncertainty is my defense, or is part of my defense. We can look back at the Redcoats as they marched from Boston to Concord and Lexington, the shot heard around the world that started the American Revolution. They were looking for gun caches. Look at the history, right? This is why they left Boston. This is why professional militia marched on civilians, because they were going to capture weapons. Weapons that colonists, our forefathers, or American forefathers, the framers, were holding for themselves to defend themselves. And if you read the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, and all of the thought that went into the Constitutional Convention that, of course, gave us the Second Amendment right, what people were concerned about was not being able to defend themselves, was being at the mercy of a tyrannical government that knew everything and had all the power. It's that equilibrium, it's that balance. And the ability to preserve that mystery, that uncertainty, gives us that balance, that equilibrium in our market. So that's a long way of answering your question. Yes, I support constitutional carry, and I support our Second Amendment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. That's a good question. And I would remind, as we're coming up, it's about 7:04, 7:05 on the clock here, so we're now probably firmly halfway in. If you have a question, please feel free to write it. Drew will get it up here to us, or just let one of us know, and we'll help you complete that form. Jerry Gooden, our sheriff here.
Can I change my question?
You don't want to ask this question anymore?
Well, I do, but I got something that's probably more important.
Okay, well, Sheriff, I'll indulge you here.
Okay.
What's your question?
It just kind of plays off what we talked about here, common sense and the right to bear arms. So what I'm gathering is that there's possibly some people here that say since the government has a nuclear weapon, then private citizens should have a nuclear weapon. Okay? Totally nonsensical, totally out of touch with reality. And it's the same way with a lot of the weapons that we have nowadays. There is no personal reason whatsoever that somebody needs a fully automatic assault rifle that is only used and only made to kill people. That's what it's used and made for. If you want to go to a controlled environment to shoot those weapons, they ought to be able to do that, okay. But for somebody to be able to go and buy these type of weapons that's killing our folks, that's killing our people, it's just totally nonsensical. Now, I'm not telling you you can't have a 6-shooter, okay? But, and you talk about arming the police. We had to go get a light armored vehicle from the United States government, the Scott County Sheriff's Office, to be able to use to take our men and women when we do search warrants and we do things that we have to do for the police, because the people we're going against now have got these fully automatic weapons. They talk about militarizing the police. Well, yeah, militarizing the police because we have to. You can't go out and make AR-15 with a 6-shooter 38. In order to have a law-abiding community, in order to have common sense rules, it's that simple. You have to have rules. Where does it stop? Nuclear weapons is next. People can have personal tanks next. That's my question.
So the question, to paraphrase, is where does an individual's rights stop in terms of what they may hold or possess from the standpoint of
Exactly.
weapons?
There's nobody here saying you shouldn't have handgun. I don't think there's anybody here who says you shouldn't have handgun. Probably the crowd over. But my question is why should you have a nuclear weapon? Why should you have a nuclear?
Yep. Okay. Well, let's see here. Tonya, I believe you're up next. So what's your response?
Well, I'm not sure we should have nuclear weapons, so I don't like them. But when you're talking about the Second Amendment, which should not be infringed. It's not about going hunting. It's not, I'm gonna go hunt a squirrel to protect your First Amendment right. That's not what it's about. Our founding fathers, people say, well, they fought with muskets. Well, that's what was available then. And I think if our founding fathers was able to transfer into time right now, they would probably say we the people should have tanks and helicopters. That's just my opinion on that.
Matt?
Tanks and helicopters. Thanks for your question, Jay. 90 years ago, we already had this question in the United States, and we have literally made it harder to buy automatic weapons, right? So there's a difference between automatic, you pull the trigger and it continues to shoot, and weapons where you have to continue to, rapidly move your finger to shoot more bullets. And we said over 90 years ago that it's dangerous to have an automatic weapon in this country. And we said it was dangerous for the same reasons I think that you're saying, because de-escalation is a good thing, because you shouldn't be able to outshoot police officers who are keeping our community safe. Now, we didn't take those weapons away, just like you said. Those weapons are available to go and get. If you have the training, background checks, mental health checks, and you show that you're capable of having those weapons without hurting the community or by being safe in the community, you can go get them. But again, do I think everybody should be able to go buy a helicopter and ride it? No. Do I think everybody should be able to go buy a nuclear weapon? No, that's silly. These military weapons should be in the hands of trained professionals. I think we can all agree on that. And you should be able to show that you're a trained professional before you have them and you go into the community. It's as simple as that. I'm not infringing on anybody's rights or the Second Amendment, but simply saying that we need a community that's for non-violence and for de-escalation and making sure that weapons of war are in hands that are capable and responsible.
James, where is the limit?
Great question. First off, as a libertarian, we're one of the few parties that are anti-war and absolutely think that our government should restrain itself when we talk about foreign affairs. So when we're talking about nuclear, specific nukes, I don't think the government should have them. I don't think individuals should have them. That's a ridiculous statement as far as why would an individual need that. When we're talking about needing weapons, yeah, I want my sister, who's a minority, to be able to defend herself in a house where she is threatened. It wasn't that long ago that we saw in our communities hate groups in numerous numbers come up to a door of a minority, and whether it be lynch or threaten, it was absolutely ridiculous. So how do they defend themselves? Officers were slow to respond, often in these communities, and so it came down to individual rights. We need a way to defend ourselves. That's not defending ourselves from squirrels, it's not defending ourselves from deer, it's to be able to defend our homes. We have the Castle Doctrine in Indiana. That's something that's important. When we talk about restricting gun rights, we're talking about taking the defense of an individual and taking their property rights away and not allowing them to live in a safe community that is for them. So absolutely, I'm about self-defense, and I think the new question is something that libertarians get a lot, but it's something that is just not realistic. We don't need nukes on the government, and we don't need nukes as individuals.
Jeff?
So I'll agree with that. I don't believe in personal nukes. I don't have any nukes myself. I'm pretty sure that having a personal nuclear weapon is illegal then and now. It's illegal to have personal body armor. It's illegal currently to have an armored vehicle, so I can't just go out and get my own tank. But at the same time, having that balance against government, what the militiamen in Concord and Lexington needed, demanded, fought and died for, was to have at least some kind of parity. And technology evolves. And so our laws and what's allowed and what is allowed to be personal will need to evolve and adjust somewhat. That line is changing now with the increasing efficacy and power of fully automatic weapons. Does that mean that we all get personal nukes? No. But does that mean that there's some fine line between? Yes. And personally, I'm not even sure where that is. I'll also add that it's more than society. It is about the dangerousness of any particular technology to society. There is an entropic nature of information. So Adam and Eve ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge, right? And once they ate it, they couldn't go back to realizing or pretending that they weren't naked. Something changed. It's one direction. We can't put the genie back in the tube. We can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Information is one way. And so once fully automatic weapons are created, once nuclear weapons are created, we can't just ignore that they exist, because somebody bad will have intentions to use them and use them against us. That's been our national military strategy in mutual assured destruction with nuclear weapons since the advent in 1945. We've had more nuclear weapons, not because we love them, because we want them, because we need them as a deterrent for anyone else, whether a nation-state actor or a terrorist organization who might wish to procure them. And that is the deterrent factor of having firearms personally on us. So whether that means it's limited to a handgun or limited by flag logs, there's a lot of room for conversation in our society, and that will continue to change as we evolve and as technology evolves. But it can't be absolutist to say that it's never. So I thank you for the question, and thank you for the dynamic approach to understanding what does it really mean to protect ourselves, defend ourselves, and defend our families. Thank you.
Chad.
All right. All right, so I just believe in common sense on this issue. So apparently there's a line, right? That machine guns and automatic weapons are not safe. But apparently across that, the assault rifle is safe, right? And I just don't understand the thought process behind it. I don't care how many times you have to press the button, the trigger button. But you know, I think that maybe we have a scale of what a gun can do to a body. Like if it does a certain amount of damage to a body in a certain amount of time, then it should be illegal. I mean, I think that the idea that we're going to have automatic versus semi-automatic be the safety line is, I think that we need to grow with the situation. I think we can learn from the situation that, hey, you know what, guess what? AR-15s aren't safe. Assault rifles aren't safe. Let's do something about it. I mean, if we can move the line, we made the freaking line. So that's all I got. Thanks.
So obviously, a few heavy questions here about a topic that's got a lot of attention here with the events of the day. I want to turn back to kitchen table issues for a second. You know, most of the time, you know, and I think the local officials, John, certainly you'll agree, I think, with this statement. I see it as a city councilman in my city. You don't get the big weighty questions. You get, hey, how are my potholes being filled? How are my roads being repaired? The drainage being handled? Those type of things. And obviously, there's a role that the state and the federal government have in those, you know, addressing those issues. How do you see your respective office playing a role in helping to address those type of issues? Fixing the potholes, addressing the infrastructure needs of the community. And Matt, we're starting with you.
Thanks. So my role would be from a federal level, the United States House of Representatives, or will be on November 8th when you all go out there and vote for me. And I would like to just look towards the past, the near past, of the infrastructure bill that went through recently, where it put in the American Rescue Plan both. That put money directly into the state and local levels and allowed the state and local levels to invest that in their communities. And it did that because local communities know best where it's needed. They know where the potholes are, they know where the roads are, where people drive too fast. These are, when I'm out and about, these are the issues, honestly, that I hear about most too. It's, hey, I need to make sure that my child can get a job and can stay here in this community when they're older. It's, hey, people are driving too fast on my road. Like those are the things that I hear about. And so from a federal level, what we can do is we can make sure that the grants are going into communities and that we're investing in our communities. We're investing in our students, our teachers, our law enforcement, our futures. That's what I see the role as the federal level. And personally, I think I can do a really good job of that because the Elementary and Secondary Education Act needs rewritten. It needs reauthorized soon. and as an education policy expert, that is one thing that directly impacts 10% of school funding throughout the state, throughout the nation. And that 10% of funding is oh so important, and I hope to be able to rewrite it and make sure that our schools can thrive. That way our students can be successful right here in our communities in the future.
Awesome question. Potholes, very real, very present. It's not a federal issue. Why should we be paying potholes for those in California, for those in New York, for those in Texas? It's a local issue that we need to get the federal government out of the way. With all the red tape, it ends up being wasted and spent in ways that are not accountable to you, the people. The best way to fix your potholes is to get the federal government out of the way and to utilize that money that would be going to the federal level on a state level and even a county level. That's how we fix your immediate neighborhood problems. And I actually love that he brought up schools, because I was also going to bring up schools. Your individual school is about 8 to 10% budgeted by the federal government. When we look at that, often to comply with that budget, you actually end up spending more than what's given to you on the federal level. So they like to control your whole school through 8 to 10% of its budget, and by complying, you end up spending more money than is even necessary that you get. So why is that? Why is the federal government putting so much restrictions and so much red tape that it's not even doing any good at this point? We have to bring funding back to the local level so that that money can actually go to teachers and directly affect that teacher crisis, right? We all know there's a teacher shortage. I work in a classroom as a behavior therapist, and I've seen the shortage and the demand on teachers. That is very real. If we bring back the money to the community and utilize it on the community level, we'll do more good than we will at the federal level. So let's reduce the waste at the federal level, and let's get more money involved in the community level.
Jeff, it's up to you.
All right.
Maybe a hurdle for Secretary of State candidate.
As Secretary of State, here's the catch. As Secretary of State, I want you to have the tools that you can vote on your favorite pothole. It's a joke. Come on. Guys, we gotta have fun. Laugh. It's okay. Laugh. It's all right. So truly, you're right. This is not directly involved in the Secretary of State's role. However, again, the tools we talked about, recall, ballot initiative, referenda, those are the things that we can use to control the people who can make those choices and to influence them and say, we've got a pothole problem in our town, in our county, in our city. I need you to pay attention, I need you to fix it, but also I'm going to start circulating a petition to get you removed from office. Those are the things that we can do through the election process. But one thing I do want to point out here is there are about 6.5 million Hoosiers, right? That's no surprise to anyone. And the state, of course, run by a Republican supermajority at the moment, they're very proud of this, they have a state surplus of nearing $6 billion, which when you do the math is about $1,000 per man, woman, and child in Indiana. And they're very proud of the fact that they've taken our tax money from us. It's out of our pockets now, right? The state's just sitting on it. I know I could spend my $1,000 better and would like to. But the state's taking it, they're sitting on it. They're very proud of this. And they're very proud of this reserve budget they have. And yet, I bet you and you and you and me could all go out and find some potholes right now, and they're not fixed. If we have $6 billion and all this time and all this luxury of resources, let's at least solve this problem. We can fix our potholes. And if we can't have the simple tools to capture the attention of our elected representatives by recall, to say, you're not living up to your job, you're not living up to your responsibilities, get with a program or get out of office. We have the resources, we can do this, you choose not to. And I would love, and Drew, I believe, if I'm not correct, you've invited our Republican counterparts to tonight's event. That's a yes, as you have to all the other events. So it's truly a shame that the Republican supermajority is not represented here at all tonight, because I'd love for them to respond to the thought that they have these funds, they've overtaxed us, and yet we still have potholes and so many infrastructure issues, state, county, town level, that are unresolved. Thank you.
Chad, your take on potholes.
I don't like potholes. Yeah, so I did end up finding out what a state representative does, even though I didn't learn it in school. And you know, that's a big part of getting money out to the communities is what a state representative does, setting budgets, saying we're taking this $6 billion and what we're going to do with it. Like I said, that's money that we gave, and they're just sitting on it going, hey, look at what we did. And I think that as a state representative, I have the opportunity to work with people to get the funds where they need to go. We've already had a lot of great things done with Build Back Better, we've had and Ready grants. There's stuff out there. We just got to make sure that we get the money to the right people that know what they're doing with it. And I think that's the reason that there's money sitting there is because people aren't inherently experts on these things. We got to get them trained and so they know what they're doing. So, thank you.
And Tonya?
And I agree that the potholes are not a federal issue. This needs to be taken care of at the state and local level, but there is the domino effect. Right now, we pay too much taxes to the federal government, and then they spend way more than what they take in. So our country is in debt, has been for a long time. Our country is broke. They're barely making the interest payments on the loans that our country owes. I think it's $85,000, somewhere in the 80 range, that each and every one of you owe of the debt. So not only do you have a mortgage and car payment and your electric bill, you each owe $80,000. It's over that. So if we can reduce the size of government, reduce the spending. Personally, I'd like to get rid of the IRS, abolish the IRS, and just, each state can do state taxes. And that way, more money is back to the state and local levels to fix your potholes.
Well, Darren has the next question, and I think this is a pretty good question to ask this group. Where do you see the Senate and the House going with the MORE Act? And just for those who may not be familiar with what the MORE Act stands for, is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. And I think this also drives at maybe a second question of how do you feel? Do you support or oppose that act? So we started, I think, James, you're up on starting with this one. Where do you see the Senate and the House going with the MORE Act?
The MORE Act is cannabis, and it did pass the House. I'm not optimistic it'll pass the Senate, but we'll see. I hope it does. And I think the cannabis is a real issue because we're jailing people for nonviolent crimes, and it's something that we use to target. I like to look at the fact that when we target cannabis, we don't go to sororities on college campuses. We don't go to rich areas. We target communities that are already hurting with cannabis. So it's something that we need to get out of the way, and we also need to have a banking issue. Right now, more Americans can buy cannabis legally than not, and the banks need to figure out how they can legally do this. And right now, the federal government is stopping them from doing that. So the MORE Act will fix all this. Will it pass the Senate? I'm not optimistic, but I hope it does. There's also another way that we can address this, and that's simply taking cannabis off the schedule. Both of these are great solutions. I believe the Democrats are really on board with this. I know Tom McDermott is. I'm definitely on board with legalizing cannabis for all, and I think this is something that will also bring that younger voting crowd in, and we need to address it now.
Jeff?
So you've heard this before. Again, not something directly related to the Secretary of State's office, but again, giving us the powers of ballot initiative and referenda, so that way we can write the laws that, and recall as well, to adjust officials who are in office and may not be representing our changing interests, and that's okay. But to have the tools to have government do our will, right? Self-government, the concept being we get to choose what laws we want for us. And it's pretty clear based on polling and other data that we, the people, really do want to legalize marijuana. Regardless of where we are as individuals, that seems to be the consensus. And I believe there's a majority of states at this point who have legalized marijuana at some point, or cannabis at some level or another. And so Indiana is actually lagging. We can look at it from the tax perspective of all our tax dollars that go over to Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio, and neighboring states that have legalized cannabis in one form or another. But bottom line is, I want us to have the tools to be able to choose the laws directly without the obfuscation from a middle management level of government. We heard during the gubernatorial debates last cycle in 2020, the Republican governor said that he still wants to have more research on cannabis, as if the past decades of history and decades of legalization in other neighboring states, as if none of that matters, as if none of that existed. So it's a bit farcical to think that we're still waiting for the research to come out. We're actually behind many of our peers, and as we've seen in other town hall forums with Democrats and Libertarians, there's pretty much unanimous, and we were talking about this, chatting earlier, we were asked on stage who here opposes marijuana legalization, and not a single one of us did. So I think there's a lot of unification and agreement on this point between Democrats and between Democrats and Libertarians, that we should all be working together to help allow you and allow us to choose what's right for our own bodies. Thank you.
Chad?
Do I think it'll pass? No. Do I wish it would? Yes. I think that we can't depend on the federal government for this issue. It needs to be a state issue. We just need to legalize it in Indiana completely. I don't think that we need to be keeping track how much people have, and we don't do that with alcohol. You don't have to report how many Budweisers you got in the fridge to the government. So I think that cannabis just needs to be completely legal. Expunge the records of people that have had minor possession, and we can use it for to help with PTSD, with veterans. I think there are so many opportunities for growth with cannabis that we need to just take advantage of that.
Yes, I definitely support the MORE Act. I did 2 years ago. A couple years ago, when it was going through the committees in the House of Representatives, I was, as a candidate, telling people, hey, they're going to pass the MORE Act. It's going to come on the floor. No, never get to the floor, never get to the floor. Well, it did. And I said, hey, people, they're going to vote on it. It'll never pass. And it did. Then when it got to the Senate, Mitch McConnell wouldn't even let them hear it or talk about it. It was dead in the Senate. This time around, it's passed the House of Representatives, and now it is in the Senate. And I'm actually optimistic that it might pass this time. So we'll wait and see, but I do support the MORE Act. I think here in the state of Indiana, it's a whole different ball of wax. I think we have, it's 38 states that have passed some form of legalization of cannabis or marijuana. I personally think marijuana should be legal across the board, not just for medical use. But the state of Indiana is always behind on everything. I think they were one of the last states to pass or to get ATM machines in this state. So we're always behind the other states. So even if it passes at the federal level, we still have a ways to go here in the state of Indiana.
And Matt, you'll close us out on this question with the MORE.
Thank you. I'm also pro-legalization of cannabis, as many of the candidates up here. If you just do a pro-cons of it, I think it's good for farmers. It gives them another crop to grow. I think it's good for businesses. I think it's good for the tax revenue of the states who have legalized it. I think it's potentially good for those coming off opioids. Medicinally is something else to take and help with pain. I'll throw out, I feel like I've been a pretty common sense candidate this whole time, whether it be not putting tanks on the streets or making sure that our Department of Education can appropriately give 10% of funding. That way our children with disabilities are looked after. It's something our public schools do really well, and I would be scared that 10% of funding goes away. I think I've been a common sense candidate this whole time, and so I will at least say we should do it right though, and we do need to look at addiction. And children, those brains don't stop developing until 23, 21, 25, the age is in there somewhere. And so do we need to make sure yes, I think we should legalize it. The pros are there. but we need to make sure that we are not creating other substance abuse problems while we do that.
So Jeff, we're going to do a rapid fire question because I think this one is pretty much a straightforward question. Denny Wilson asked, explained this to me because I had a question about what exactly he was getting at. He's concerned about the 22nd Amendment. It states that the president should have 2 terms or a maximum of 2 terms, so 8 years in office. And he's worried that there may be influencers or powers that would not follow that. I think this maybe stems out of some concerns for certain individuals maybe coming back to office and wanting to stay in office for much longer. So rapid fire, just real quickly, 20 seconds here. Do you support the 22nd Amendment, and would you support its enforcement, opposing a president from seeking a 3rd term?
Okay, great question, 20 seconds, go. Yes, I support this 22nd Amendment. Yes, I support term limits. Caution though, it's an imperfect solution. There are pros and cons. What happens is with term limits, we shift power away from candidates who are term limited out to political parties who can stay, party chairs who can stay in power indefinitely. And now that power is really held behind the scenes. We can't vote for these people, we can't recall them, and now we've created a whole other type of monster.
And that's the time. Chad, 20 seconds.
All right, yeah. Yeah, I totally support it. The purpose of that amendment, so we don't end up with a king. We don't want king or dictators. So we've gone, and we've had a lot of history tonight, and we've gone through some peaceful transitions for the entire history of our country. So I just think we need to keep that up.
Good. Tonya.
Yes, I support the 22nd Amendment. If you read the Federalist Papers, number 51 through 60, when they were talking about congressional terms, they actually were thinking about making it 1 term for Congress, 1 2-year term instead, or no, 1 year for 1 term instead of 2 years. It's 2 years for each term. But they were actually thinking 1 year would be enough because we're supposed to take turns from our community, representing our community. I have
20 seconds.
Darn, I have more to say. Well, I'll elaborate on that when I get my close.
Matt, 20 seconds.
Yes, I support. I think Jeff brought up a really good point that it does have its limits, term limits. There are limitations with it. I think really we need to get money out of politics so we're getting better people there to begin with. Not only does the party have more influence, but then the lobbyists have more influences if they're the only ones who are staying in DC long term. So yes, I support term limits, but with caution.
James.
Yes, term limits. I'd take it farther. I want all Senate candidates and all House candidates to have term limits. I believe this is a way we bring accountability and power back to the people, and I'm 100% on board with term limits, and I think that we should have a peaceful transition every time that president switches.
Very good. I appreciate that. Very good. Yes, a big around. So at this time, we have come to the end of our question and answer session, and we want to give each candidate up to 2 minutes to give a closing remark. Some of them will be around afterwards. I know the sun is kind of coming in here, so Matt's changing his perspective a little bit.
Get down in the sun.
But we'll begin with, I believe, Chad, you're up for your first closing, and again, 2 minutes. Go.
All right. My main issue that I talk about most on the campaign trail was briefly mentioned. We didn't really get into, and that's addiction in mental health services. I think that we've got a crisis around the state with this issue, and we need to work harder for those people, especially rural communities. Don't have a lot of access. Like I said, I'm running. My main goal is just to actually represent the people of the district. Like, go to Indianapolis and represent the people of the district. And I think that we all want common sense and we all want the right things. And it's not as complicated as we make it sometimes. So that's what I plan on doing.
Tonya, you're close.
Terms. That would be a total of 4 years. myself. I don't have to wait for a law to tell me that I need to be term limited. And also, I also pledged that if I did serve 2 terms in Congress, I would not run for US Senate afterwards. I would not use it as a stepping stone to run for another office. I want to be a voice of the people. I want to represent you all and go to Washington and represent you the best that I can. But I think 4 years would be long enough. 2 terms would be.
There are people missing from the room, and I think that's just as important to realize. As a teacher, it is so important that we invest in our schools, in our future, and our kids. As a leader in my labor union, it's so important that we fight for good wages and benefits and retirement for people. And I have done those things, and I will continue to do those things when you elect me. And finally, as somebody who is raising 3 small kids here in our district, I want them to grow up and know that this district is beautiful, and this district has stuff for them, and they can stay here and thrive. And that's what I plan to do as your representative, is make sure that everybody knows that. Please go to matt5.com, talk to me after this event, let's get involved, let's get people out and voting, and let's get a Hoosier in there who will represent them. Thank you.
James, you're closing.
Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. I want to end on something that we all agree on. Republicans right now are not representing us in Washington, D.C. In fact, politicians in general are not representing Hoosiers in Washington, D.C. We need a change, and we need to vote a different way. We need a fresh, modern approach to Washington, D.C., and we need to understand that federal issues and politicians trying to make personal decisions for us at an individual level is just not working. We're definitely needs accountability, and we need to focus on how we reduce the waste that is in Washington, D.C., including how politicians use money and manipulate the vote. So let's bring a change to Washington, D.C. Let's look at ways and alternatives and solutions. I run a solution-based campaign. I'm always looking for answers at the table that the middle ground can find. I don't believe we're as far apart as most people believe we are. And I believe that, as we've mentioned, there are many things that we can have conversations over a dining room table where we can actually come up with great solutions for all Hoosiers and for all of America. So again, appreciate you here tonight. Thank you, and thank you for your time. Look forward to talking with you after. www.SceniakForSenate.com. Thank you.
Jeff?
This is the last word?
This is
the last word.
Well, I might have a few last words, but go ahead. You're going to be
2 minutes of last
candidate.
word-ish. All right. Thank you all for coming. This has been a long evening. Let me ask a dangerous question. Are you ready? How would our communities be different if Election Day came the day after Tax Day? Wow. Things would be different. Government would be accountable to us. They'd have to answer. They would be fearful of us, we the people. That's the way it's intended. And as Secretary of State, that's what I want to do. I want to give us the power, even if we disagree, and you've heard plenty of areas where we agree tonight, plenty of areas where we disagree. And that's okay. But it's our American tradition to come together and choose what's best for all of us. And those are the tools that we need more than ever. We need the clarity, we need the transparency of elections that we can trust, votes that we can verify, going back to the very beginning tonight, to give you a receipt, so that way you can walk out of the polls with the confidence that your vote, your will, your choice for how you want to live your life has been recorded and counted, and that your future is of your choice. That's what I offer to you, a truly nonpartisan issue, truly nonpartisan solution, and I thank you all for coming out tonight. You can find out more about me and this campaign and things that I like.
To make sure that they're aware of the issues that are important in this election, not only to you, but to us as a community. And so with that being said, I want to thank you again for joining us for this town hall. Thank our candidates for participating today. We'll probably be having some more of these in the near future that you can participate in. And again, thank you for your time tonight. Let's go have a good evening communicating with our friends and family about the importance of these issues.
Thank you.